Today I wanted to talk about a little different topic, a plea to reopen Yucca Mountain. For those of you who know me, the last part of my career I worked as in radioactive material licensing, eventually became the manager of radioactive material licensing for the state of Texas. And I also spent a year as chair of the Disused Sources Working Group of the Low-Level Radioactive Waste Forum, where I was an advocate for waste disposal, proper waste disposal of radioactive materials, and in particular was trying to get people that were storing radioactive materials on site or radioactive waste on site to go ahead and dispose of it, since we now had a good waste facility, the WCS project that had opened in Texas, that was available to take most waste, that was most low-level waste. So anyway, I was really disappointed during the Obama administration, where Harry Reid had Obama shut down the Yucca Mountain storage facility, because we need a place for nuclear waste. I've worked in the nuclear power industry out of college for a while, and so I have a real strong sense of importance of dealing with the nuclear chain of safety, including the ultimate disposal of waste. And while the waste is safe at more than 60 different sites across the United States and numerous sites around the world, it's important that all the radioactive waste be disposed of someplace safe. We can't envision a future where 1,000 years from now we still have waste sitting at all these different nuclear power plants, sitting there with a few guards around. It needs to go someplace for long-term security. And in the U.S., the best place for that is Yucca Mountain. It's the one that's been prepared, the money's been spent, everything's been done. And like I said, Harry Reid's been the roadblock. It's really come down to one man or a few men. And we're at a point in the U.S. where Biden needs to establish a commission on nuclear and radioactive waste to reconsider opening Yucca Mountain or finding an alternative. If there's just too much pushback coming from Nevada to ever move forward with Yucca Mountain, then they need to decide that. There are groups in West Texas and New Mexico where some other facilities are located that might be willing to consider, the locals might be willing to consider having a different type of long-term repository for nuclear waste. So first, I'd like to run down what we have currently available. The highest level site we have now is the WIP site, the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, and it takes the government's greater than Class C waste, and this is leftover waste from the processing of nuclear fuel mostly for nuclear bombs, but also the U.S. government nuclear programs. So they can take the most radioactive waste that's below the actually nuclear fuel waste. And it's a below ground cavern where they take elevators down into a cavern and fill the waste in. And it's a good project. It's a good facility for that waste. They have had some problems, but it's a good facility. But it's limited to only government produced waste. Now, there's another government facility at the Nevada National Security site. They have a low-level radioactive waste site, a big open pit where they put low-level waste, once again, that the U.S. government has developed. So Nevada, at what used to be called the nuclear test site, already has radioactive waste going to it, just lower level waste in this pit. And there's commercial sites for publicly produced waste or commercially produced waste, there's the WCS site in West Texas, and they'll take most types of waste. And even though they're in a compact with Vermont, the compact has a system where they'll accept waste from other places if they go through the application process and get approved. And most people get approved eventually if they do all the proper application processes and prepare their waste properly. And there are also 3 older sites that just work regionally right now, at least 5 years ago before I retired, in Barnwell, Clive, and Richland, Washington. And so they work, but there's a system called the compact system where you have different compacts, groups of states that have their own radioactive waste sites. And so they restrict it to other people. And this is an idea that, we'll have compacts so that we don't have one state that's the dumping ground for everybody else. Well, that's kind of what's happening now, is WCS is becoming the dumping ground because they're the big site. And they want the waste, they want the business, and they're okay with that, and the compact is working through that as well, and accepting a lot of waste. And so it's a good program, and right now those things are covered, but there's some gaps. And like I said, the biggest gap is the nuclear waste. We need to get rid of the nuclear waste, move it from the sites at the nuclear reactors into a long-term repository where it will be safe for thousands of years. And then we need also a greater than Class C waste site for industrial sources. And these are some bigger sources that were used like in medical for teletherapy machines, or used in blood irradiators, or big sources used for, or certain transuranic sources used in other industrial applications. And honestly, the simplest thing to do is just let those sources go to the website. But that would require that the U.S. government, the House and Senate, pass a law that allows that. And then the other thing I worry about is orphan sources internationally. It's bad enough that there are orphan sources that happen in the U.S. when companies refuse to dispose of their waste, so they stockpile it, then they go out of business, and then the government has to pay for it and move it to one of these waste sites. So in many cases, the US, the UK, Russia, other countries have sold devices containing radioactive material to other countries around the world, and then when they don't need it anymore, they need a place to dispose of it. And basically, the countries that manufacture the sources or devices need to take responsibility for that material and take it back. When I worked in industry where we sold devices, X-ray fluorescence analyzers, we would take them back internationally for service and then end up pulling the sources out to decommission it and then ultimately dispose of it. Although we stockpiled material for a long time while we waited for the compact site to open. And so internationally there's a big problem, and some countries are dealing with it. They're coming up with like borehole technologies, dig a deep hole that's safe, put the sources in, and then eventually seal it up. But it would be simpler for some countries if the US, UK, Russia, whoever else who sold sources or devices takes responsibility, takes these sources back. But once again, that's something that usually requires a change in laws, because most countries have laws that prohibit radioactive waste being sent back to them. So those are 3 areas that are gaps in the U.S. system, the nuclear waste, greater than Class C waste, and the orphan sources. And that's why I'd like to see Biden form a commission to look back into this and make some decisions and most importantly on nuclear waste, reopen Yucca Mountain. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching my video, and if you do, please share, like, subscribe. Share it with anyone you know who's concerned about the radioactive waste issue. And if you'd like to support my research, I have books for sale on quantum field theory and particle theory. And if you buy one of that books, that helps me in my retirement, helps me continue to do research and put out more videos. So I appreciate that. Thanks.